Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Civics. And we're on episode 4, and we're going to be talking about the Constitution today, which is our current governing document. Like we said last time, after Shays' Rebellion, the people kind of in charge of the national government realized that things needed to change. Clearly, they weren't working the way they were supposed to. The new government was not effective enough, and so something had to be done. And so they called basically an amendment session. So they were going to all meet together, and they were going to try to make an amendment to the Articles of Confederation to change the document and make it more effective. What ended up actually happening though ended up becoming the Constitutional Convention. Basically, once they all got there, they kind of realized that this document was not great and that they needed to start over from scratch. And so they kind of began furiously working secretly. They weren't letting anybody know what they were doing, to see what they could come up with that might be a better solution. Now, let's kind of talk about what happened. So this was created in 1787 at the Constitutional Convention. It wasn't actually effective until 1789. So in 1789, that's when the document came into full force. So up until then, they were still under the Articles of Confederation. And the cool thing about the Constitution, which is our current governing system, is that it's meant to be a living document. And what that means is that we're supposed to be able to change it as we see fit, as the times change, to make it more effective. You can kind of think of it as a national Google document, right? We have this thing and it's set there, and there's certain ways that we're allowed to edit it, but we are supposed to be able to. If something's wrong or if we need to change something because it's that important, this document is able to be changed, which is one thing that the Articles of Confederation lacked. To change anything in the Articles, everybody had to agree. That's not how it works in the Constitution, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So the new government that was created via the Constitution, its main goal was to try to, one, create an executive power that the Articles did not have. So someone who could make decisions and be in charge. And then also it wanted to create a balance of power between these three branches that it's going to set up and the people. So most people, when they talk about the Constitution and our government, they say that the balance of power is between the three branches. But in reality, because those branches are meant to serve us, the citizens of the United States, and the people who live in the country, the people are also kind of their own separate branch. So in reality, there's actually like 4 branches in the Constitution. There's the legislative branch, which is where Congress is, the executive branch, which is where the president is, and the administration and the bureaucracy, the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court and the courts underneath it, and then the 4th branch is really us. We the people of the United States, are a branch of our government. The government exists to serve us. That's its purpose. It's supposed to be serving our needs and helping us. And we have a lot of power and sway over it. Our opinions, the way we vote, when we write to congressmen or the president or anyone, we have power in our system. At least that's the way it's supposed to work. So that's kind of the main goal of how the government was supposed to be set up under this new Constitution. Like I said, in the first 3 articles of the Constitution, it lays out the 3 branches of government. The first one being, of course, the legislative, and it created a 2-house Congress. The second branch was about the executive branch, which in the document really just talks about the president and the vice president, but also has now become this large administrative system where we enforce the laws and make sure that everything's working correctly. And, so we have lots of departments the president manages, like the post office and the IRS and the Army and the Navy and the regulatory devices for commerce and all of that. That's all under the executive branch. And then finally, the third branch was the judicial branch, which establishes the Supreme Court and allows Congress to make more courts if necessary, and kind of gives the Supreme Court the authority to try certain cases. And we'll talk about those in later episodes as well. In Article 4, the Constitution talks about the relationship the new federal government will have with the states. In the Articles of Confederation, the states were all equal and they were all independent. And that was kind of an issue. So now, under this new document, all the states are still equal. They're still equal in each other's eyes. None of them are inferior to the other ones. However, the new federal government, or the new national government, they called it a federal one, that new federal government is above and regulates the states. So the states can't hurt each other anymore because the federal government is going to regulate what they can do. So basically it establishes this rule where the national government is always on top of state governments. So the national government, the federal government, has power over them. And that's to make it so that states can't undercut each other anymore, and our nation would become more united. In Article 5, it talks about how to amend the Constitution, because remember, that was kind of a big sticking point in the Articles. And to amend the Constitution, to amend the Constitution, 2/3 of Congress and then 3/4 of state legislatures would have to approve an amendment. So right now, at this current time, 2/3 of Congress would have to say, yep, we're okay with this amendment. And then I believe it's 37 states would have to agree. And the state legislatures have to vote on it. So, and sometimes states will have like special conventions instead. So instead of the state legislature just deciding, they'll allow an election, and each district will send someone to this special convention, and they'll vote on it that way. So each state kind of has a little bit of leeway to do that, but as long as it's approved by the states. 6, once again, this talks once again about the federal government's rules, or its power over the states. And it says that the federal law is the supreme law of the land, meaning that state laws do not supersede federal law. So that means, let's say a state had a law in the books that they really like, but there's a new federal law that says that that's not allowed. That state law is no longer effective because federal laws are supreme. And then finally, in Article 7, it says how the new government would be ratified. Now remember, when they met for this meeting, they were just amending the articles. And to amend the articles, all the states have to say yes. But the Constitution document says that only 9 of the 13 original colonies had to ratify it for it to go into effect. So basically what they were saying is we know that we're under the Articles of Confederation right now, but we're not going to obey that document. We're going to do our own thing here because this is necessary to bring about a better country of ours. And if you remember all the way back to when we talked about the Declaration of Independence, we talked about how when a government is not doing its job correctly, it's the people's right to abolish that government and start over again. So in effect, the Constitution was the founders' first real attempt, other than fighting Britain, to show that, hey, if things aren't working, we're going to be willing to scrap what we're doing and try again. And so they've created this new document, and that's governed us since, 1789. So it's been a very successful form of government for the country for a long time. So clearly this second attempt was a much more solid attempt than the first one. So after all this happened, and they ended up letting the states see this document after working on it in secret for months, there ended up being a huge fight over whether to ratify this thing. So the reason that it didn't become effective until 1789 is because there's a large section of the population that said that this was a bad idea and that we shouldn't be switching our government. The government would become too powerful. The new constitution would lead to monarchy and awfulness, and we can't have a president because he'll become the king, and there's lots of different arguments and fighting about it. Something that I would suggest you read if you're interested in that fight is the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers is actually a grouping of essays written by three people: Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison, I think, and they're all defending the Constitution to the public in New York. And those ended up being kind of the documents that pushed people towards ratifying it. But that was a long 2-year fight, really, to get it ratified in enough states for it to go into effect. And in all honesty, once it did become in effect in 9 states, the rest of the states followed pretty quickly afterwards, because they didn't want to be excluded from this new government. So next episode, we're going to start talking about the different articles in the Constitution. And we're going to start, of course, with Article 1 and the legislative branch. And we'll start moving through the Constitution and learning about its intricacies and what exactly it says. This was kind of more of an overview and some history. And now we're going to get into the actual what it says and what that means. Thanks for watching again. Hope to see you guys soon.